Today is Friday, June 14. I'm Pastor Anthony, and this is Wilderness Wanderings. Today our text comes from 1 Samuel 14. In the following text from 1 Samuel, the name Jonathan has been replaced with its meaning, which is gift of God. Hear this text. Saul therefore said, "Come here, all you who are leaders of the army, and let us find out what sin has been committed today. As surely as the Lord who rescues Israel lives, even if the guilt lies with my son, the gift of God, he must die." But not one of them said a word. Saul said, "Cast the lot between me and the gift of God, my son." And the gift of God was taken. Then Saul said to the gift of God, "Tell me what you have done." So the gift of God told him, "I tasted a little honey with the end of my staff, and now I must die?" Saul said, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, gift of God." But the men said to Saul, "Should the gift of God die? He who has brought about this great deliverance in Israel? Never. As surely as the Lord lives, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground, for he did this today with God's help." So the men rescued the gift of God, and he was not put to death. That's 1 Samuel 14, verses 38 to 39 and 42 to 45. Our Father in heaven, as Pastor Michael told us yesterday, is the good gardener. But fruit can be hard to see. 1 Samuel offers some lovely case studies to train our eyes for it. The fruit borne by Saul's kingship is shown to be the fruit of death. The fruit of God's kingship, however, is the gift of life and salvation. Jonathan embodies these gifts of God throughout the narrative. It's what his name literally means, which is why I read this meaning into every instance of his name in the text above. Because really what's on trial here is not Jonathan, but God's gifts. This text brings the showdown between Saul's ways and God's. In the verses leading up to this moment, we have seen that Saul uses religious rituals and words devoid of faith. We have seen how he is willing to dehumanize his men and drag them nearer to sin. We have seen his rash oath-taking cut the men off from the promised land's flow of honey. And now here another bad faith oath places even his son in the very gift of God that brought salvation under the threat of death. Jonathan's story leading up to this moment is quite different, though. Even without the rituals of Israel's religion, Jonathan is able to hear from God. Jonathan is able to see and taste the honey of the land of God's promise. Through nothing more than Jonathan's faith, God begins defeating the enemy in battle, causing the Philistines even to begin striking one another. God's salvation, promises, and gifts are things that Jonathan can not only see and receive, but also participate in ways that bring life and salvation to himself and the people. Yet Saul has not understood that this great victory was a salvation gift from God. As far as Saul can tell, it is he who has avenged myself on my enemies, as he says earlier. Saul wants more. He wants to continue doing his work in his own strength, constraining his men in whatever dehumanizing ways he needs to in order to see it done. But a priest steps in and says, "Maybe we should inquire of the Lord." So Saul does, but he receives only silence. Saul assumes there must be some sin afoot, and is angered by the thought that some misdeed in the camp could be keeping him from his prize. So he declares that even if the fault lies with God's most precious gift to him, his own son, Saul will kill that gift to get what he wants. It's a devil's bargain if ever there was one. But God will not be manipulated, despite Saul's oaths and religious rituals. Nor will the men. They have seen and judged for themselves what is good. They have seen God's gifts, the ones they were kept by Saul from tasting, like the promised land flowing with milk and honey, but also the gift of God's salvation come through God's gift in Jonathan. So the men decide that they can no longer abide with the death-dealing fruit of Saul. They choose for God's gift of life. Jonathan is saved. The men have judged these trees by their fruit and have chosen well. Our gardener God's kingship brings life, and his gifts are good. May you have the eyes to see these gifts and make the same choice today. And as you journey on, go with God's blessing. May the peace of the Lord Christ go with you wherever he may send you. May he guide you through the wilderness and protect you through the storm. May he bring you home rejoicing at the wonders he has shown you. May he bring you home rejoicing once again into our doors.